Go Chiefs.
I had a
We
lot
as
of
athletes of the world have an obligation to shed light in the what we might call the shadows of the American dream and the shadows of humanity.
Welcome, first-time listeners and returners, to the Sports Deli, where everyone deserves a seat at the table.
And the Sports Daily podcast is sponsored by my YouTube shop. Yes, there is a YouTube shop, and all you got to do is go to youtube.com/@Mike and you will see thousands of items in there to choose from. It's unbelievable, y'all.
What about fucking Colin? Why does he not have a fucking job? Because he's still being whiteballed. Why is Tom not speaking out about that? He should be his biggest fucking ally. And he hasn't said one fucking thing. A lot of people that have come on this show, I don't know why, they've gotten some good fucking jobs afterwards. Jim Rome in the jungle. It's right here in the Sports Deli, baby. We got some good ass karma right here. Let's fucking go.
I love it.
Man.
I love it.
We hope you enjoy today's show, everyone.
All right, let's rock and roll. Today's podcast is brought to you by my Amazon shop. Check it out at amazon.com/shop/the Sports Deli. And you can see all the products that I've done videos on, my idea list, and my shoppable photos. I may enjoy today's show. Do we have to refer to him as Mr. Duncan? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, please, I'm very formal, Secretary Duncan.
There you go. Exactly.
Just put a sir on the end of it. Mr. Duncan, sir.
Well,
Or yes,
because,
sir.
Jay Billis always said that he could never call Coach K Mike, even
Oh,
after
yeah.
all these years, kind of thing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Mike's a different level. I'm not. So it's all good.
All right, here we go. All right, let's rock and roll. We're so honored to welcome on International Holocaust Remembrance Day poet, teacher, and philanthropist, the Munich, West Germany, and Washington, D.C. native who, following high school, attended Ivy League schools Dartmouth and Harvard before playing in the National Football League from 1978 until 1996. Most of those years with the Super Bowl-bound Kansas City Chiefs, where he was inducted into the Chiefs Hall of Fame in 2009. Just weeks before the recent ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, Nick and Chiefs teammate Tony Richardson visited Israel, where he not only met and developed a very special bond with one of the families of one of the hostages that was just recently released, but went to the Sea of Galilee and the Western Wall to be rebaptized, where he felt an instant connection with God upon touching the wall. An incredible humanitarian, Nick has been on a path for a long time to combat anti-Semitism and racism, in particular trying to unite Christians and the Jewish people impacted around the globe, set in motion in large part because of his mother. So not surprisingly, he was awarded the Steinberg DiNicola Super Bowl Humanitarian Award in 2019. And today, you will hear the rest of the story. He's been featured on HBO and Dave Letterman twice, been in several movies, been a 3-time presidential aide, was born the same day as Sam Snead, Jackie Slater, NFL Hall of Famer, Frank Thomas, and Jeff Bagwell, the same year as Bill Maher, Bjorn Borg, Arsenio Hall, and Mel Gibson, and one day before Kirk Gibson, Jerry West, and Jim Thorpe. You can find him on Instagram at Nick Lowery. Lowery has an E in there. Nick Lowery 88, where he has one. When I saw that, I was tripping. 1 million followers. Are you kidding me? He has a new book
We
called.
don't know where they are. They're all over the place.
Yeah, we don't know where they are. And you can also find them at nicklowry.com or org and at loweryspeaks.com. Nick, truly an honor to
Thank
have
you.
you on the Sports Daily podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, and let me just clarify a couple things. I was not a Munich native. I was born in Munich because my dad was
Born.
in his early stages of his CIA career. My dad, I found out when he died in 2009, only when he died, that he wasn't just senior CIA. He was chief of station in London in the mid to late 60s. And then he was number 2 in Germany when there was an East and West Germany, because he was an expert on Russia and Eastern Europe. My mother was born in Cairo, Egypt, but she was in the first full class of women at Oxford studying Hochdeutsch. And so she spoke literally the best German in England. So she was sent to document the death camps just at the end of World War II, and then she was sent to interrogate Hitler's record keepers in Berlin and Minden after the war. So that was the secret was that she didn't tell us about the death camps. And when I heard about that, it just was so profound. It still is. It makes me very emotional about it, because it's just like a mother's love to keep those things that are so dark, that energy. And I actually went back a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, with Christians United for Israel to Poland, to Auschwitz and Birkenau to get a tour. And then we brought 100 Ukrainian Jewish refugees with Sean Alexander and Jay Feely, two other NFL brothers, to Israel. And that's where the connection began with a man named Eric Rubin, who founded something called Project Max. And I'm very, very, very proud to be one of the founding members of Project Max. And we just went to Israel just 3 weeks ago to honor and support the families of the hostages and the hostages themselves. And as you know, just 2 days ago, Nama Levy was returned, who's the one that I've been lucky enough to do some things to call for the release of Nama and to speak for her, because athletes of the world have an obligation to shed light in the what we might call the shadows of the American dream and the shadows of humanity. So I'm filled with gratitude. I just got a text just 3 hours ago from Nama Levy's father, Yoni, and I was with him in Hostage Square with his son, Amit, and we hugged each other and spent a couple hours with each other there and prayed, and our prayers were answered. Unfortunately, there's a very good chance that the great majority of the remaining hostages won't be alive. Let's hope that they are. And even if they are alive, what they've been through 478 days in dark tunnels, unspeakable evil and torturous situations, it's got to be life-changing. But all of us do what we can. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack. Should probably let that breathe for a second. I was actually going to start with your mom and dad because I thought that was fascinating. And, we're all impacted by our childhood in different ways. You're a Christian, but you have this profound, overwhelming sense of connection on so many different levels because of your upbringing. For me, it was my great grandmother who lived to be 103 years old. And, my family obviously has a history with the Holocaust there as well. And, did you meet with Tamir Goodman also
Yes, of
while you're in
course,
Israel?
both
Yeah,
times.
the Jewish
Almost 2 years
shorted.
ago, and
Yeah.
then this past time. And actually, his daughter Araya gave us a tour of the Nafar Oz kibbutz. She's a soldier there. Her name means God's light, and she gave us a profound, but still very professional tour of that base where so many people were just systematically brutalized, murdered, etc. And we felt like it was important for us to go through that and see it with Tony Richardson, my dear friend and fellow Jets and Chiefs Hall of Fame teammate. But I was there on that tour with his daughter, which was pretty awesome. He was called the Jewish Michael Jordan, and he gave up some opportunities in his career because he would not play on the Sabbath.
Right.
But yeah, it's cool meeting people that are just have that much depth, have that much character.
Yeah, he's been like that since he was a kid. He's always been just a profoundly grateful and humble person. It's interesting. I just saw, as I was on my walk this morning working out, somebody from Auschwitz, one of the twin sisters,
Right.
who talked about her and her twin sister, who both survived, being experimented on. And, I hear Gary Vee talking about all the time. If you're looking for things around the world in your daily life, you're going to find whatever you're looking for. And
Yeah.
that's true, but silence is also deafening. So as you said, if you're not going to find your own little corner in the world and speak out about things that are a part of your compass, then what are we doing?
Yeah.
Even if we're in the minority, or even if it takes time and history reveals itself later.
Yeah, it's and we have a different opportunity. I mean, I grew up, I didn't know I was going to make it in the NFL. So
Right.
so Mike, I was going through 11 rejections by 8 teams, and but in the meantime, in the off seasons in 1977, before my senior year at Dartmouth, I worked for Senator Chafee of Rhode Island. 78, I went back and worked with him after I was cut after 2 games, which we won with the and only one miss with the New England Patriots. Then I got a job thinking it was over after 11 tryouts with the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee for Senator Bob Packwood. And out of the blue, I had 2 offers from the Jets and the Colts, and I just felt like, nah. And I went Kansas City to try one last time. Having thought about it, I should try one last time, which was the 12th time, which is a biblical number. And the Chiefs offered me $2,500. Nobody had given me any kind of bonus. That was nothing
Wow.
today, but and they also said they'd bring me in May. And so instead of coming in late July, I had 3 months to get ready against the greatest kicker in the history of the game. I've got his jersey here. He's become a good friend. He hated me for a while because I beat out Jan Stenerud
Right.
and broke every one of his records, and I'm proud to say that. And none of it would have happened if I'd given up. So all these things weave in together, and
Amazing.
so then I do make it, but I kept working in Washington, and started to notice, that call to serve can be answered in multiple ways. And the stage you have as an athlete back in 1980, 82, when I started Kick with Nick for cerebral palsy, is so much brighter now because you have social media. And so people like Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce, they've got, 100 million followers. And of
Crazy.
course, Taylor Swift hasn't hurt, but they already had tremendous exposure. And each athlete has a chance to be their own radio/TV station and get their word out. So you have an opportunity to make a difference. So, and then I just thought I'd bring this up because life is so ridiculous sometimes if you pay attention. It's been sort of a Forrest Gump life for me. I grew up next door to a Supreme Court justice who led the NFL in rushing twice, Justice Byron Whizzer White. I win the award named after him. And then a guy named Muhammad Ali moved 2 doors down from me in 2007 and was my essentially next door neighbor who I drove to the NBA All-Star game, who I took to 10 movie premieres, who I would join for lunch or dinner every few weeks. And there was a guy who used the stage of an athlete in a way that no one ever had before.
Never.
Wouldn't compromise, like Tamir Goodman, wouldn't compromise his religious beliefs, and was vilified and hated, the subject of the ultimate kind of racist um, treatment, and yet transcended through the end of the Vietnam War to the point where everybody remembers 30 years later holding the Olympic torch, even though his Parkinson's made it pretty difficult to not shake. And he was loved. So isn't that interesting? If we stand for the right things in the end, God, whoever you want to say, providence, and ourselves, we live with ourselves in the end and the choices we make. So we have a great opportunity as athletes. Every one of us has a great opportunity to make a difference in the world, each in our unique way.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And we've had 2 former track and field athletes from the 1968 Olympics on the show. That was obviously famous for Tommy Smith and John Carlos, along
Yeah.
with the Australian who was vilified by his own country, and until I think it was 2008 or 2009 was recognized for his courage. So
Yeah.
to your point, I mean, a lot of those guys lost their careers. And so I was curious about what it was like besides your mom and dad's incredible story and their impact on you. You're in Washington, D.C. during the civil rights movement, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King.
I was there. I was young.
Well,
Yeah.
you were there, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you felt the vibration because it does
Yes.
play a part into the fabric of who you are. You're aware of it,
Oh, and the Kennedys, Bobby
and the
Kennedy
Kennedys, exactly.
was in the front yard of Justice White because Justice White was a Rhodes Scholar going to Oxford. So he's there in England when Joseph Kennedy Sr. was the ambassador to England before World War II. And so Justice White, Byron White then, who'd been very arguably the greatest football player in the nation at that point, but also finished #1 at Colorado as a student and became close friends with John F. Kennedy and
Wow.
with Bobby Kennedy and with Joe Kennedy Jr. And so in the second day that we're at 6803 Hampshire Road, at 6801 Hampshire Road next door, Bobby Kennedy with his very bright hair is standing in the front yard with his dog, having walked 5 miles over from Hickory Hill. And I saw him right there. And so, these people were right there. And Justice White was #2 at the Justice Department in charge of the U.S. Marshals and helped commandeer the school buses that protected those marshals those marchers into Selma, Alabama. So yeah, there were these echoes, and I may have only been 6, 7, 8 years old,
Right.
9 years old, but Martin Luther King was murdered when we were in Germany, in Turmstrasse, which was the name of the street we were on in the semi base in Bonn, Germany, where the capital was renamed Martin Luther King Strasse while we were still there, just less than a year after he was murdered in 1969. So, those echoes, you can pay attention and you can say, hey, these are signs of what might be important, what might be what I would call the deep core values of what I want my life to be about, or you can just live your life with a little bit of a myopic
Yeah.
sunglass on. So,
Well, and Martin Luther King was probably not looked at very favorably back then, probably a 25% approval rating. And now, if you take away some of the vitriol and some of the racist trolls and things that we see on X and some of the other platforms, he probably has at least a 75, if not a 90% approval rating, at least the respect of what he accomplished. So sometimes you are where he was, and now we look, like you said earlier, history will reveal itself. And, there's a lot of things we're going to talk about in the interest of time, but what are your thoughts about where we're going in the United States? If you were able to have a conversation with President Biden, the late, president, and now Trump, what's the one thing? Because I think one of the misnomers is President Trump does not like war. He's actually not a war person. So despite all the things that I can't stand about the guy, there's one thing that I do like about him is that he'll make idle threats and all of these things that he's talking about with tariffs and all these things. But what's the conversation like between you and President Biden and Trump? Would it be the same, or would there be a different conversation? Obviously, a lot of us, Barbara Majeski, myself, and others, have been very critical of the Biden administration for not being more outspoken about Israel and
yeah.
what's happening there. But go ahead, yeah.
But I will say, I was a government major and working with the inner city youth in Kansas City with kids with cerebral palsy, then working for Senator Tom Eagleton, a Republican, a Democrat, and then working for Elizabeth Dole, a moderate Republican, and the chairman of the House Rules Committee, who was a Democrat. And so at this point in my life, I really don't care about party. I think particularly the Democratic Party right now has swung so far left that Republicans are very much essentially JFK Democrats.
Right.
And so, but I worked for Reagan in the Drug Abuse Policy Office in the off season. So that would be February, March, April, May with Donald Ian McDonald, who was essentially the first drug czar, but he wasn't officially that. And then I helped with the subsequent H.W. Bush administration. I worked for Reagan, not because I agreed with everything. I knew what he stood for, and I knew that he would be consistent in following through on those things. Whereas with Biden, they may have said that they were standing for certain things, but they really weren't, and they were never owning what they were actually doing. And so I'd rather work for a leader that says, here's what I'm going to do. You have a right to disagree, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and people are going to vote for me based on that and be a hell of a lot more transparent. And so my opinions come, and this is my ethical standpoint. I like to say there's an ethical backbone to why I believe in what I'm doing, and what is to be there, to go to Israel and see for myself, which I encourage everyone to do, because then you understand things at a very different level. For instance, 30 years ago in the world, there were 1 million Jews in Muslim countries, and now there are 27,000. But I went to the border and met Chris.
On the other hand, in Israel, everyone is welcome.
There are 2 million Muslims that are
Exactly.
full citizens. And I do want to talk about Majd al-Shams and Salah, whose son, I get texts multiple times a day, including today from her. She's a hairdresser in Majd al-Shams, which is 1 kilometer from Syria and just 5 miles from Lebanon. And, the terror and trauma of 50 kids, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 being blown up, 12 being killed on a soccer field. But, I went to Yuma and met Chris Clem, who was then the chief for the Border Patrol there. And then I met Raul Ortiz, who was the national director of the Border Patrol. And 3 days later, happened to be, he was going to be in Kansas City. So it happened to be the Thursday night opening game for the Chiefs. And so I met him in person. Then I went to Washington, met him. So I saw for myself in Yuma what was happening, where the number of people coming across went from 25 the last year of the Trump administration to almost 1,000 per day in Yuma. And when you go with a 30 to 40 times or 4,000% increase, you're just overwhelmed, right? With
Yeah.
so-called processing is impossible. Then I saw on the border, which is being corrected now, cameras that were dismantled. So even when they had cameras that could help them, they were dismantled. So it was a very intentional policy, which was completely lied about by Mayorkas over and over and over again, saying we're doing everything we can. And of course, we know that Kamala, call her the czar, call her whatever you want, she never made any attempt to really find out what was going on. And when they did go there, they laundered the situation. So they had the tents and all the people moved away to make it look different. So it's just a lot of propaganda. And I'm not going to say that Trump is perfect either, but like to return to my original statement, I'd rather work for a leader that I disagree with 40% of the time, who I know what he stands for, and we can measure it. What happens in government, having worked more different places for 4 different US senators, for the chairman of the House Rules Committee, which determines what legislation in the House is controlled, right, and how it's debated, et cetera. And then for H.W. Bush in 89, 88 for Reagan, and then for another Democrat, Bill Clinton, on AmeriCorps. All these things about kids, young people having a chance to lead, to look at the transparency of leaders and whether they stand for something that you can follow and measure. Change does not happen in 3 years or 4 years, but
Right.
it definitely happens in 8 years. Well, change does happen, but you can measure it. And if you follow it and that's consistently followed, you can really see whether what I said I'm going to do, A, I did it, and B, what were the results. And if you don't have that, you really can't learn what works, what doesn't. And that's really where I come from. So with Trump, first of all, people don't change fundamentally, but the spectrum of their behavior can change. And look at how much more diplomatic he is now. He believes, with good reason, that God saved him by turning his head at the precise millisecond where he wasn't killed. And we won't even talk about how many things had to happen for the Secret Service to allow that situation to happen. But it's pretty preposterous that that happened in the first place. And frankly, with my father as chief of station for the CIA in London, my father left because he believed in 1974 that Nixon had, rightly we now know, politicized the CIA with Watergate, et cetera. And it's gotten worse. And it doesn't mean there aren't great people in the CIA, doesn't mean there aren't great people in the FBI, but holy Toledo, let's clean up and make sure that the people are in it for the right reasons, that are serving the president, and of course, serving with an ethical and legal standard as well. And so with Biden, I just didn't see a consistency with the Democratic Party, the focus on things that were helping 1% of the population, which is valid, but not helping or not focusing on the great majority of problems that have to do with being able to pay your bills, knowing that 57% of the population now can't access $1,000, that and or within 2 paychecks of bankruptcy. I work now for almost 20 years with the homeless in Phoenix. It's called Champions for the Homeless. We served over 100,000 homeless. I've seen the patterns there, disproportionately minority. And I'm a huge Bobby Kennedy Jr. fan. He's a friend. He's texted me and several times this past week. He's going to be up for approval for his position at HHS on Wednesday. And that's my kind of leader. Know what they stand for, have the courage to put yourself in a hailstorm of criticism, not necessarily because the criticism is fair, but because you threaten where people have been so used to benefiting. And so service to your country, whether it's military, whether it's serving your country as a citizen, doing what you can in your community, those things to me are the prime deep core values of what makes a country and a community, a family, an individual, a great human being, and a great culture. And that's what we've been losing So there's my State of the Union address, if you will.
Well, I go back and forth with people on the other side of the aisle very often. And, to your point about cleaning things up, knowing what people stand for, and my issue, obviously, as well as a lot of people, is the methods and the lack of apology. And when you have
Never
such
apologizing, never saying we didn't get it quite right. We'll learn from.
exactly.
How do you learn if you can't ever say in a very complex world that maybe you needed to get it better and you're learning and you're adjusting? And that's actually what Trump's done. He's doing things very differently. The people around him now, whether it's Tulsi Gabbard, whether it's Elon Musk, RFK Jr., Vivek, I mean, these are people that are in it for the right reasons, even if it's not what people want to see. Change is a hard thing, and he's got much better people around him now because he's learned the system. And a lot of it is learning what you can't do.
It's interesting you said that. Now, this is probably going to piss off a lot of people that are on the left, but I'm actually doing another special podcast about how I'm relating, even though I don't like Trump. And obviously, I hope he does a good job, and I hope that the first time. But
Yes.
when you step on your own so many times and piss people off, there's been a shift when you're trying to change a culture. And this is my equivalency. Trump is trying to change a culture, just like a new coach that comes in and is trying to clean house and change a culture.
Yep.
And you're going to piss some people off in that process. But I don't like that there's this lack of acknowledgement, like you said, a little bit more from his side about what the other side might have done well. And it's so appealing to people that in the crossfire is the racism and the misogyny. Even if it's perceived, it's not something that he gives a crap about. Even if he appoints someone from the LGBTQIA plus community, there's the perception on the other side. So you could probably bring more people to your side if you were just a little less Trump and MAGA like. But if I don't know if that's
He is,
possible.
though. He's being less Trump and MAGA light, but he's just never going to be, you know,
What the
he's never
left
going to be
wants.
Biden. He's not going to be,
Yeah.
he's going to be who he is. But, and there are times when he digresses into the old battles, but for the most part, he's learned a lot. And so if he sticks with that, look at all that he's done already, because he realizes he's only got not really 4 years. He's got about 2 years before people go, who's going to be next? And we hope that Vance can be the next one. So there's this follow through as well. But let me just also say something, Mike, which
Yeah.
is when you look at the forces of the media that have been allied against him to paint him as being 10 times worse than he is. Yes, misogynistic. Yes, all those things. But by the way, please, the famous quote, let he without sin cast the first stone. I want to know how many of the people don't have their own skeletons. But Stephen Colbert, I'm calling you guys out. Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, have the balls to say when Trump does something good. The amount of
Totally
money,
agreed.
the amount of money over the last 8 years, every single night for 5 minutes, all of them at the same time, which on an advertising thing, it's great to have all the networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC saying horrendous things, joking, making him the worst person ever. That's money behind them, paying them to paint him a certain way, and yet never saying or acknowledging ever when he does something good. That's crap. That is really, to me, unethical in the end. It really dilutes their credibility as human beings to not be able to see anything that isn't of value. And by the way, when this election happened, despite all the efforts to break him down, you don't respect 80 million people. You don't respect all these
Right.
people that have felt disenfranchised. So
Exactly.
you're just preaching to the same people. That's what the Democratic Party has to face. Are we going
Right.
to keep doing what we've been doing and not learn any lessons? In
Totally.
1982, Mike, I spent 3 months working for Tom Eagleton, who was almost vice presidential candidate. He was briefly for McGovern, right? Left side of the Democratic Party, by the way. He lost that opportunity because they found out that he'd had electric shock therapy for depression. But he was a brilliant man who would reach across the aisle to people like Senator Chafee, Senator Packwood, back in the day when Democrats and Republicans served their country and wanted to solve problems that really would make life better for everyone. And when I look at what I was studying the rise of Roosevelt in 32 versus the rise of Reagan in 82. And I spent a lot of time looking at that. And the Democratic Party did not want to see change in their policies, even though Reagan was saying, government's getting kind of big. And, there are a lot of echoes to that today. In fact, in some ways, worse than ever. And I was very much anti-Reagan in a lot of things. Well, how insensitive, how racist, right? But also, personal accountability is a core value for me. So when someone is being helped by the government, hopefully they understand, as Bill Clinton did, who I worked for, rights and responsibilities. If we're going to help you, you're also going to show us that you want to make a contribution. You're going to work to get an education, you're going to work to make yourself employable. You're not just expecting things to come to you just because you're having 15 children. You're going to try to make a contribution because God's made you special. He's given you unique gifts. Take advantage of those, but own it. And I guess that comes from being a kicker in the NFL, where no one cares what your excuses are. You either get it done or you're not. And it's 100% clear if you are good at it or not. And I became the most accurate kicker in NFL history, not because I made excuses, but because I kept working to get better after being cut 11 times by 8 teams, beating out the greatest kicker in the history of the NFL, and then breaking his records. Jan Stener was 67%. I took it to 80%. It's now 88% or something.
It's crazy.
And there's some things that have happened since, but during those times when the field wasn't so great, and the fields are a lot nicer now, I took it to a new level, but it was always learning from mistakes, missed field goals. You know how horrible it is to miss a field goal in front of 80,000 people, that your team's counting on you and you don't come through. You dream about it, you lose sleep about it, you're publicly out there, but the best way is to just keep working. And frankly, that's what Donald Trump did do during the trial, et cetera. He kept working to get better and to figure out who are the better people to surround myself with, and to humble himself to have Bobby Kennedy Jr. join his team, because the Democratic Party wouldn't even let RFK Jr. run as a Democrat. How about that as one more example, of the Democratic Party, which has left most of us behind. So good luck with that one.
Well, I hope you're right. Reagan, for, how he's perceived, put in a policy of 3 strikes and you're out, which was disproportionately, unfortunately, against people in the Black and brown community, ended up being in jail for things that probably they shouldn't have. And we're trying to reverse things like that, just like, Trump with his hyperbolic language. And so there's things that are frustrating, but I think personally, when I talk about culture, you cannot please everybody.
No.
You're going to make mistakes.
Hey,
And
try being a parent, right?
you're right.
Your kids are going to hate you, right? Starting around maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and hopefully miraculously at about 24, they're going to go, Dad, maybe you had some ideas. I have a twin sister, and
Wow.
her was the greatest ever, right up till about 12. And then she hated her mother for about 5 years. And now they're great again. But, being a leader and setting standards and holding people accountable, including your children, there are a lot of children out there that are adults, but they're adult children expecting everything to be easy. And unfortunately, we've created a culture where the military, it's a very small group of people that serve, that go through the hell of war, and very few people understand the sacrifices they make. And look what's happened. I held one of the first national town halls on veteran suicide in 2018 in September with Dr. Barbara Van Dalen, who was the Prevents Task Force director, nonpartisan for President Trump. And we're looking at 22 suicides a day, and it's really closer to 30. Thank you. How hard? If it was 2 a day, I would think it was too much. And so there's an example of people that have been responsible and been accountable and put themselves and their lives and their limbs on the line, their families as well. And what are we doing for them? We don't do a tenth as much as we should, which to me completes the circle of, once again, accountability and also gratitude and appreciation for those people that want to make just simply are willing to sacrifice for their community and their country to make it better.
Yeah, there's a lot of issues. I hope Trump does something with gun control. I don't know if he will, because to me that's another big issue that's, in this country, where the NRA
It's
started off
horrible. Yeah,
as one
it's horrible.
thing and they've turned into something completely different. I want to ask you about my hat, because I have to, because you're a former NFL player. Now,
Okay.
my contention with almost every episode has been, looking back on it now, they'll show comparisons between what he did, which was recommended by a veteran to sit, and he decided to kneel instead in protest of police brutality. My contention is, let me get this out real quick. If Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, Tony Romo, Troy Aikman, Jim Nance, Tom Brady, and the rest of the white quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, had shown support, had kneeled with him, that he might have had a job, and he was blackballed by the NFL. And I feel like that was one of the most, you talked about Muhammad Ali, one of the most terrible injustices in sports history, in my opinion.
Well, we're going to have a difference of opinion there because he waited till his career was on the downside, which didn't help. Of course, Muhammad Ali gave up the heart of his career and still came back and won 3 championships, 2 more championships. But he certainly had a right to do everything he did outside the stadium, right? Muhammad Ali was not in the boxing ring taking a knee, right? He was doing it by saying, I'm not going to serve my country. I'm not going to go to Vietnam. And they would have given him a chance to do like a lot of people like, well, I mean, look at Ted Williams and what he did, right, as a pilot
Right.
in the Korean War. And so I'm friends with Jim Harbaugh, and I know that with him as his coach, a great quarterback, that he was tremendous for basically one season, maybe two, but then
Yeah.
he was on his downside. And frankly, I think his Kaepernick's girlfriend was a toxic person that completely sabotaged the best opportunity he had to go with Baltimore when she made these statements. And so teams are reticent to go back to what had happened. And I just feel if he had every right to protest, to do it in the stadium is a different order. It puts your team in a different focus than the actual game. To do it outside the stadium, to do it during the week would have been a different thing. I would have supported him for that every time. But the national anthem is something that means something to me and to a lot of Americans. And I think there's more of a consensus about that. And frankly, I have a real problem with somebody who was raised by white parents who did so much for him, and all he does is talk about that they had their racist issues. Oh, they did? Okay, so once again, where's your gratitude for being given a chance that many people would not have had to be successful because you had white parents that raised you? Obama, as another example, was raised by white parents and yet, never gave a whole lot of credit for that. So, once again, I spent most of my life working with inner city youth and adult role models for youth, 80 to 90%. We Youth Friends, which was the program, helped 20,000 inner city kids, 80 to 90% African American. I've been chairman of the National Fund for American Indian Education, the only white person I became chairman. I was nominated by Clinton in 2000, renominated in 2002 by W. Bush. Working with the homeless. I mean, I'm angry about it. The 6% population in Phoenix that are black, in Arizona, the homeless is probably population probably 35-40% black, and it's probably about 50 to 60% minority. So I spend my life working with people that are of minority background that are disproportionately shut out from the opportunities to win their own games, to play their own sport of life and be the best that they can be. But I also want people to accept as a leader. You're going to get unfair criticism, as Harrison Butker did, by the way, when they misrepresented what he did, which was to speak to a graduation of conservative Catholics. And certainly he focused on the fact that it's okay for women to
Stay at home.
stay at home, but he didn't
Yeah.
say that you can't have a great career. But I may have put it a little differently. So once again, the efforts to misrepresent people that don't exactly march to one drummer, if you will, that's pretty ugly as well. But I will say that owning your stuff, owning your ability to make a difference in the world, to certainly be given an opportunity, an equal opportunity, but not an equal outcome, is what this country is about. And certainly then it comes down to your unique talents, your character to work hard. Martin Luther King staple, your character to work through adversity and to make something great. And anybody that does that, no matter what their race is, those are the people I want on my team, and I'd love to be on their team.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you shared all your thoughts because people tend to oversimplify things. And there's a level of arrogance on both sides, things that are conveniently left out. Both sides are pushing, their specific narratives. And the reality is people were sick and tired of the border. And people, as I've said before, they don't have the bandwidth to fight for 50 things. They were fighting
Yeah.
recently for red dye number 3 and the healthcare system. And if you start to throw 8 other things in there, they're going to hear Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. They're not going to hear it. They won't have the bandwidth to care about it. And what people cared about was some of what you talked about, whether you think it was right or wrong. And I actually think it was right, was the border. And whatever, throw the egg prices and the gas prices out. It's going to stay high. But the border pissed people off. And I don't like how they're going about making detention camps and the language that's being used about rounding people up. But you know
Right.
what? We have to get past some of this stuff. You're not going to change everything about someone from the other side.
We have
Listen
to be
to
able to see the other side. We have to give
exactly
people credit, including
right.
the left credit as well. But I will say, as an example, where are the stories? Where are the Woodward and Bernsteins looking at where are the 300,000 tender age children that came across the border the last 4 years that have disappeared? And then apparently, 75,000 of them have been located, even though Mayorkas says he didn't know where they were. Those are tender age children. We would do a national manhunt for
Right.
one beautiful kid. So, stay compassionate, try to see the other person's point of view, try not to just jump on it. This thing is both God and the devil because it's provoked through these algorithms, knee-jerk responses, angry responses, canceling. We know all about that, and suddenly I hate you. I've had to lose some friends from it because suddenly Trump is the worst person ever, and he's a POS. Wow, that's so sophisticated, and yet you're not looking at what he's doing. And by the way,
It's working.
yeah,
It's working. He
I'm
changed
looking
the
at
culture.
I'm looking at 350 million people, and if we can help 250 million people have significantly better lives in terms of being able to afford what they can do, better salaries, less taxes, like no taxes on tips is one example. My friend Bill Walsh, by the way, who's a great small business expert, he helped Trump see that as a great thing. And then, of course, Kamala then imitated that, which was really amusing. But there are things to make life better. And a big part of that is to have an education system where people are brought up not to memorize, but to think critically. That's my father's job at the CIA, was to discriminate in a good way between lousy information, false information, misinformation, and good sources and quality information. My father's mentor was Arnold Toynbee, very arguably the greatest historian of the 20th century. Look him up, everybody. Toynbee. He became godfather to my older twin brothers. My family's 2 sets of twins. And Arnold Toynbee wrote a work called A Study of History that was 14 volumes, 3 million words, and it looked at the 21 great civilizations. And what did he use as his parameters? He had a philosophy of challenge and response. He looked at the great cultures, look at America this way now, look at the world this way, look at yourself this way. How do we deal with adversity, like a missed field goal, like, making a bad choice, cheating on somebody, not working hard, not taking responsibility? And did we learn from it? And did we grow from it to become more responsible, harder focused, better balanced, more compassionate, more real, more authentic as a human being? And what I love in my life is I cry a lot because I know I'm doing God's work. And I'm not trying to proselytize. What I am trying to do is just say, the juice of life is to listen to what your unique gifts are and to align your values and do something with it. then you'll be dying on your deathbed with a smile on your face, not having regrets because you lived a life of meaning, of contribution to both left and right, by the way, not just Republicans, to all people, especially people that need it, whether you're a hostage, whether you're Native American, whether you're a white American in Tennessee or North Carolina, whether you're a wealthy person from Malibu that just lost their house and a $5 million house and everything in it, everybody deserves dignity and being able to think critically, to work through the huge noise of information today and see people that have character, authenticity, heart, and honor that even if you disagree with them. That's the big challenge.
Man. All right, can we get a few this or that questions in there? Some fun final questions. All right. So you went to the Berlin Wall and the Western Wall.
Yes. Wow.
Do you have
I never thought of that. I've been to both of them. Yeah.
a preference, or were they just both equally as impactful?
Well, I mean, I'd say, when you're talking about the Western Wall, you talk about God, and you put your hands on the wall, and at least for me, if you have faith, I felt connection with God. You don't need a priest to feel that and to feel like, what am I doing in my life, and is it aligned with what I can be doing? You see the emotion that comes with that. The Berlin Wall, I was there with the Kansas City Chiefs in 1990, just months after it came down. And I felt proud to be somebody who was born in Germany and to see the destruction of this wall and the opportunity, unfortunately, to some degree missed, but certainly the opportunity to restore levels of democracy and once again honoring people for their right to have a life of some level of liberty and creativity and art and joy, and the ability to choose their leaders. So very, very different, but certainly breaking history. But one is eternal, the Western Wall, and one is certainly historically very profound. So to make a choice, I mean, they're just different categories.
How do you think the NFL's handled CTE and concussions?
Well, I've been very lucky to do work. I've worked with Lee Steinberg, who's done a lot of work in that. I actually am ambassador for Alzheimer's Treatment Centers of America. I've hosted the concussion movie pre-premiere from Sony Pictures, where we had doctors from Mayo, Banner, Barrow, Dr. Sidney Pardino from Palm Springs. We had the hockey players from the Coyotes. We had Jim McMahon and Lincoln Kennedy and NFL stars to talk about concussions. I've hosted that with the Cactus Foundation. And so the NFL's done some things. I mean, they've reduced a lot of tackling. The helmets have gotten better. I did work with CBD for 5 years because there's a lot of evidence that CBD, not marijuana, hemp, not marijuana, please.
Right.
Once again, this knee-jerk thing that cannabis is all the same. It's a different plant, but CBD creates, and you can look it up, UCLA Torrance did a study of 446 traffic accident victims with head injuries, and those that had any CBD in their system were 5 times less likely to die from a brain injury. So it creates neuroplasticity, or what I'd call an inner helmet. So, and if you look at the NFL, they've softened their position on marijuana and on CBD, and that's probably helping as well. So they're doing more. It's a violent sport, but it's also the best damn sport in America by about 4 times over baseball and basketball, which are great sports. I played in high school and played baseball in college. But football is the supreme sport because it's such a rich combination of strategy and coaching and amazing physicality and beauty and grace all in one.
People don't understand how big the playbook is in the NFL. Like, if a basketball player had to learn an NFL playbook, it's so complicated compared to other sports like plays and playbooks and signs in baseball. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's crazy how complex it is.
Unbelievable. And
unbelievable.
So football players have to be very smart. They have to think very quickly. And why the Chiefs, I'll get into that, because the Chiefs now heading to their 3rd straight Super Bowl. No one's ever won 2 and then been headed to the 3rd. No one's ever done that. So we've already done something no one else has. Andy Reid and Brett Veach, the general manager for the Chiefs, and Steve Spagnuolo, they have players that are what I call like Teddy Bruschi did for the Patriots, players that in the moment on the field can throw away the playbook and think and make adjustments. And that's what I think, what a great idea about every human being. If we can not only say, here are my values, I'm a Democrat, here are my values, I'm a Republican, but how about in the moment say, you know what, I can sort through all these things that are happening and make a better choice, make sure that I get the ball being whatever is the prime deep core value that makes things better for your team, right? So the Chiefs players know how to do that. And look what always happened last night, Samaje Perine, discarded by the Bengals, discarded by the Denver Broncos. And what a great receiving running back for us. And, he could have dropped that pass and suddenly we might have lost that game. Everybody says, as happens, right? When you're successful, whether you're Trump or whether you're Biden or whoever you are, you're subject to unfair criticisms from now the Chiefs because they win so much or hated. But the truth is, separate from referees, you had to catch that pass. You had to get the pass to Xavier Worthy to get another first down on 3rd and 4th down, to Isaiah Pacheco, right? Those were big plays that we had to make. So we had to, blitz Josh Allen on 4th down to force him to throw the ball, and it just happened to be the right choice. So it's tough to be a competitor in the ultimate level of competition. You take risks, and the Chiefs have the players that think in the moment and make the best choices almost always when in crunch time.
Well, and Andy Reid obviously is a Hall of Famer, but he lost his kid. He's been through adversity.
Oh boy.
He understands things differently than maybe someone else who doesn't have an appreciation for life like he does.
Yeah, he does. He manages players so that they see that he sees them and lets them be as much as they can. I mean, look at Travis Kelce. Travis last night, I was waiting for him to saying, you got to fight for your right to party. I mean, he's always has fun, and that's why Taylor loves him. But, he is such a magnanimous, kind, amazing respect for, but gosh, doesn't Patrick Mahomes manage his attention and fame to make every teammate, as well as Travis, as well as Chris Jones, the whole team's that way, but gosh, it starts with Andy. It starts with Clark Hunt, but it also, especially on the field, in practice, off the field, Patrick Mahomes is so humble and yet confident. He was giving me the Steinberg DiNicola Award when we almost went to the Super Bowl, the Atlanta Super Bowl, 6-7 years ago. And I was backstage at that Lee Steinberg party, and Patrick was giving me the award. We're waiting to go on.
Wow.
I'd never met him before. And of course, he was a lot younger, but I said to him, simple thing, hey, man, so close. Let's win a Super Bowl. And he immediately said, let's win a bunch. We've won 3. We're in the 5th of 6, and we're close to winning our 4th and setting history. So what an amazing thing to have that much confidence, but also humility and kindness, and to the point where opponents like him, they don't want to hit him quite so hard because he's like, great hit, after they just nailed him, right? Amazing. Well, you know what? I am a former Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. Don't throw me in a box. I believe that leadership is based most on character. I believe that I'm a JFK and RFK Democrat, and whatever that is. And most of that has to do with tapping into the best and brightest, another Kennedy phrase, in all of us, that all of us have God-given unique gifts, and the journey in life is to work through all the crap, all the defeats, all the embarrassments, to find our unique abilities, to grow into that. When we align that, Think and Grow Rich. I've been on the Think and Grow Rich tour with people like my friend Tim Story. Our lives lighten up. And to me, what I think is, gosh, when you have a chance to help other people find their purpose, if we all see that as a prime core value we all share, this nation, the culture, our families, our communities, how we treat each other, transforms from hate, from judgment, into what can I do and what am I doing and what have I done that really is helping, and how am I continuing to always grow. I want to share one story with you, Mike. You've let me talk a lot, but I want people to think about this. When I'm a senior at Dartmouth, one of the most popular courses in the spring at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, was taught by Arthur Mayer, and it was the history of film. And he was 94. He had an 88-year-old wife, Millie. He
Oh
taught
my
at
God.
Stanford in the fall and Dartmouth in the spring.
Oh my
And
God.
I walked with him several times from his house that they gave him in the middle of campus, the half mile over to Dartmouth Hall where he lectured. And he told all sorts of very intricate stories about the personalities and the politics of early Hollywood. And I'll never forget, here's a 94-year-old man walking home and he's making his old man noises, and he, well, Nick, how'd I do? And he asked his wife several times, how'd I do? How can I make it better? And she's like, well, that story was great. You forgot to tell that anecdote. It was about how can I get it better tomorrow? At 94, how can I get it better tomorrow? And that's how I want to be when I'm 94, when I'm 104, whatever it is. Always, how can I get it better tomorrow? Matthew McConaughey, when he got an Oscar, he talked about my dedication is to be the hero 10 years from now. I want to be somebody I look up to 10 years from now because of the choices I'm making today. And that means we have to accept and admit when we screw up, we learn, and hopefully never stop getting more compassionate, more sensitive, more able to see things in other people's points of view as well, so that we connect as human beings right here, not just here, but here.
Beautiful. Okay, last question. Okay, so if you could have any 5 people at your dinner table, past or present, dead or alive, and you
Okay.
never met them
Yes.
before, who would be at your dinner table?
Jesus Christ, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln.
Have you met
I
Taylor
like
Swift?
No, I'd like to have Mary, Mother Mary.
There you go.
I think she'd have a lot to add to it. Probably somebody with a great sense of humor. 30 years ago, I would have said Bill Cosby, but that's not going to be the case now. Probably Dave Chappelle, just to add some humor to the situation.
Oh man, that is phenomenal stuff. Well, man, Morton Anderson and Jan Stenerud are the only 2 pure kickers in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and Adam Vinatieri is probably next. But you
Yeah.
should absolutely, in my opinion, be in Canton. I hope you are one day. And
Thank you, sir.
truly, truly an honor to have you. I hope the Chiefs win Super Bowl 59, which would be the first time ever a team three-peats.
Repeat, baby. I'll be there.
Man, amazing stuff. Is there one guest that you think would be a good fit for this show? Like I've said a million times, I don't make anything on the show. I just do it to serve, like you, many times in your life. You are
I'd
much
love for you
more,
to have my
much
friend Tim Story on. If you haven't before,
sweet. No,
Storey. He's very profound. He's been on Oprah probably 38 times. And,
oh my goodness.
he helped revolutionize, I think, some of the spirituality in Hollywood with Jack Lemmon and some of the old guard and Charlton Heston. And then he
Wow.
became someone that had a Bible study for younger Hollywood actors and helped turn around Robert Downey Jr.'s addiction.
Wow.
He's a comeback coach, but he's spiritual, but he's also practical. And it doesn't take long for you to figure out this is a really profound human being.
Yeah, amazing stuff. Well, much more than an athlete, as LeBron has said many times in the past, and continued success. Your legacy continues to write itself, and I truly am appreciative of you coming on the Sports Daily podcast today for episode 1 of season 6, ladies and gentlemen. Couldn't have asked for a better guest. Any final parting words?
Well, my favorite quote, you've heard it before, but Teddy Roosevelt talk about character. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled. The credit belongs to the man or woman who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who stands valiantly, who knows the failures and yet never gives up and is never lost with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. That's a bit of a paraphrase, but you get the gist.
Yeah. Well, a lot of athletes don't know what to do once they're done with their professional careers, and you have found purpose and meaning in a multitude of things. And not only, I'm sure, is it fulfilling for yourself, but you have continued to serve multiple communities and spaces, and that's what it's all about, is leveraging your platform, which I have a very small one, but I still try and do my best to help those that aren't as fortunate. And I think you've done an amazing job, and I learned a ton, doing research on you that I didn't know before. And I hope people got a lot out of this podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And by the way, anybody that wants to help out Champions for the Homeless, we have a golf tournament on February 22nd in Phoenix, benefits clothing and our program. We've had 71 events in 19 years. We do it on Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and twice in the Africa hot summer. And you can go to nicklowrygolf.com or just nicklowry.com and donate. And it's a write-off, but it's a beautiful thing. And if you want to learn about more of the work we're doing, and if I can ever help you and your community, it's my purpose.
Right.
I'd be honored to do so.
All right. Good luck in the Super Bowl, and I'm sure we'll talk soon. And thanks again for coming on Sports Daily
Thank you.
Podcast. Truly appreciate it. All right. Much love and ultimate respect. Nick Lowery, ladies and gentlemen. Phenomenal conversation. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, brother. I was very talkative. You let me talk.
Well, I need to listen to the other side because I can't tell you how many times I go back and forth with people on the other side. And as much as it's frustrating, I sent a link today to Matt Gaetz, who was on Bill Maher's show, to a couple of my friends. And one of them was like, no, thank you. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to listen to the other side, as frustrated as you are, as much as you think it is the extreme.
That's just pure arrogance. How do you, I mean, why? I mean, literally,
And it was
you're
interesting.
So afraid,
it was so
you're
interesting.
So afraid.
Yeah.
Right. You're so afraid that you're going to get new information that might counter what you believe that you don't want to hear, which means you think you have all the information. You can't continue to learn and grow, even if it is to still disagree with Matt Gaetz 1,000%,
Yeah.
but at least understand where he's coming from, which means you might have, oh, what a concept, a little bit of compassion, a little bit of empathy.
Well, and it's my contention. If I think that people are, white people in particular, are so arrogant to tell black people about not only their history, but about what their fears still are, getting into a car, racial profiling, then we can't, on the other hand, be so arrogant to not listen to what the misconceptions are from the other side. You talked about the media or other things that are skewed in a certain way that are not the truth, because both sides do the same absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
And it's just frustrating. So it's hard for me to
Bill
watch
Maher,
a lot of
Bill Maher some credit and give you credit, because at least he had Matt Gaetz on, right? I mean, how else do you move things forward if you don't? And by the way, another great example, speaking of Abraham Lincoln, is Doris Kearns Goodwin's book, Team of Rivals, that he brought in people that were his political rivals because he knew that if he was going to not preside over the end of this nation, he was going to have to be able to think things through and needed to hear the criticism from people that he knew were going to oppose his policies so he could figure out what would actually work.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be that rigid, it's going to be hard to evolve and be a better version of yourself every day. I just you could be the most frustrated. You could have gone through the worst. The twin who was in the concentration camp went back to visit. Can you imagine like what that must be like for that woman? I'm Jewish. I can't comprehend it. And she went back because she felt like she needed to do that. Like you got to go outside your comfort zone. Now you got to have boundaries. You gotta stand up for what you believe in and take a hard line on things. But we're not getting anywhere, especially on our side, by doing what we're doing. We're just pissing people off. And I'm not saying that we're not right about the things that we're saying, but we're not changing the culture properly.
Go Chiefs.
I had a lot of other fun questions on the this or that, your favorite food, your favorite breakfast foods. Are you a Swiftie? But it just felt like it was the right time to. You think there should be a moral clause in the NFL like Major League Baseball has?
Well, there basically is one. I mean, conduct detrimental to the team, right? So
did Jim Tyre get in?
I don't know.
With the senior committee?
I don't know.
That was an interesting story. I didn't.
I knew his son, and it happened when I was there. What a tragedy! It almost certainly was CTE. So we could have talked about that. But anyway, yeah. And by the way, I didn't even bring up Mike Webster. Quick story with Mike Webster. His real estate agent was mine, and her husband was a close friend. And I had dinner with them 6 months after, and it was at the Bristol Bar, which used to be on the Plaza in Kansas City. And Mike was getting frustrated because he hadn't sold his house in Kansas City because he spent his last 2 years with the Chiefs. And she said, so once again, this is direct. This is not from somebody who heard. This is from the person it happened to. She was about 5 feet tall, very diminutive, probably 102 pounds. He came in after and frustrated and grabbed her with one arm under her neck, lifted her up and said, "If you don't sell my house, I'll kill you." Put her down. So that was one of the, shall we say, definitive moments when one example that we knew Mike had rage based on the changes in his brain, which of course is depicted in the movie Concussion, played by Will Smith, Dr. Benet Amalu, and then my other friend, gosh, just I'll get too emotional talking about all these players, but close friends that I've lost that were some of the great players in NFL history.
A lot of Steelers.
A
Ton of
lot of
Pittsburgh Steelers. Way more than normal.
Junior Seau.
Oh,
Yeah.
goodness
Yeah.
gracious.
My friend here was with him the week before that happened. The weekend before that happened, he killed himself on a Wednesday, and he was the roommate with Junior his freshman year, his rookie year, and he stayed at Junior's house, and for 3 days they celebrated, and then he drove back on Sunday night, and Wednesday he killed himself, and to know how close the Samoan families can be, and to know that he was going to abandon his wife and children, how he had to be in such a different place, and what that did to his family, killed his children, man.
Yeah. Well, mental health has changed for the better, I think. Do you agree with how we're
People can
handling
talk
things
about
now?
it, so that's a big step. Yeah, that's a big step.
Well, I hope they change the kickoff rule next year because that has not been fun to watch.
Well, yeah, but it's better than it was. I mean, it was where 90% of them would never, returned. At least now a higher percentage.
Are they purposely kicking them short so they will return it?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Yeah. Man. And what about the onside? Do you think you should have to announce it, or
I
can
think they probably shouldn't. I think that they keep it a little bit of a surprise,
And I hope they change the rule about penalties and pass interference, that you get one or two challenges to be able to say, hey, I think that was pass interference or it wasn't. Because if you're doing replay anyways, you might as well get it right.
Well, and there's some other things you can do, like for instance, with hitting the quarterback when, like 2 weeks ago,
They're sliding.
when they're sliding, and
Crazy.
he moves it, and it's just it does touch his helmet. You can still call a penalty, but you can maybe remove the automatic first down if you didn't think that thought it was inadvertent.
5
So there's
yards.
still a penalty, but it's not an automatic first down. You can do hopefully they'll do something like that to at least
Well, similar to the kicker, right? There's two different types of penalties if you run into the
right.
kicker. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it. All right. Well, I could talk forever because I love chatting it up. But go ahead. I'll let you go. But good luck and thanks again. We'll chat. Anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks. I appreciate it so
Thank
much.
you, sir.
All right.
Bless
Talk
you.
to you soon. Yep. Man, amazing stuff. Well, we covered a lot of different things, obviously on the other side of the aisle, and I agree with him about a lot of things. You have to go outside your comfort zone. You have to listen to the other side. There is going to be parts to it that make your skin crawl, and there's just nothing that you can do because you got to take some of the bad with the good. As frustrating as that is, but the things that we've been doing have not been working. So I hope more of the hostages are alive. I hope President Trump gets things done, and it's not in a way that is perceived as bad as it has been perceived by the left, and there's more of an open mind because what choice do we have? So again, for Nick Lowery, this is Hootie Hoot. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, much love. Peace. Big Nick.
Finally. Hey, look at it this way. Now the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, so
Yeah, exactly. But we expected that.
we did. Smart man.
Yeah, well, sometimes you can overcoach. And
What,
so I learned a long time ago not to overcoach.
what do you think was the overcoaching for obviously Buffalo?
No, I just think when you have the best player on the field, it's going to come down to that. Just same thing in basketball, all things being equal. I mean, Josh is great, but Andy has that experience. Those guys have that experience, and they're making history, and they may not have been as motivated during the regular season, but once the playoffs kick in,
All season long, I said we don't go one gear up, we go 2 gears up.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, you cannot, if I can't even comprehend it, you can, but at that level, to do something 3 years in a row, there's a reason why it hasn't been done.
Yeah,
From
yeah,
injuries to staying motivated, to consistency with coaches, it's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. And I would have liked for Doug Williams and Magic Johnson for Washington to have made it through, but uh, besides the turnovers, I mean, Philly's a machine without a passing game, which is crazy.
yeah. Well, I mean, it really comes down to one thing with them, right? Shut
Pretty
down
much.
Saquon. If we have an answer for that, and that's not going to be shut him down for 50 yards. It'll be shut him down to no major runs and to just let him get his one touchdown, but just reduce him to not an overwhelming force. Yeah.
And what an impact he's had. Goodness gracious. I mean,
Well,
running backs aren't even a thing anymore.
well, they may be a little bit more now. And the Giants, why they don't fire their general manager for letting him go? I mean, that was the most obvious thing in the world, and it was over $2 million. What a bunch of dumbasses!
Idiots. I mean, they're lucky to have those couple of Super Bowls with Eli, honestly. I mean, otherwise, the organization has not done a great job. I mean, my Lions, have done a great job. You want to talk about a general manager that doesn't get enough credit. I mean, they played a bad game, but he's done a great job.
Well, let me tell you what happened with the Lions. It's just different. When you're the number one team, everybody's looking at you going, the Lions are going to go to the Super Bowl. They're the most dominant team on offense and defense, but it's different when suddenly it's expected. It's
Yeah.
different when you're the best kicker in the NFL and they expect you to make every fucking kick, right? It's different. You
Yeah.
have to learn to manage those expectations at a different level. And it took the Chiefs. We had a couple times in the 90s where we had bye weeks and loss coming out of it because it's just different. And then to do it 7 years in a row. I mean, really, frankly, if D Ford's not offside by 3 inches, we would be in right. We'd be in six. Well, wait, 5 or 6. It would be 6 or 7,
Yeah.
six
Right.
or seven Super Bowls.
Crazy. Yeah, and I've flip-flopped on Tom Brady over the years, if you can't tell by my hat. But at the time, I was rooting for them, and I was rooting for them when they were 18-0 or whatever it was, and that magical catch by the Giants on the helmet. Jesus Christ, that was wild.
Right. Unbelievable.
And then he was out of the game a year later. So, all right, I'll do a quick intro if that's cool with
Okay.
you, and then we will get rocking and rolling. And thanks again for joining us today, everyone. Feel free to send me an email to thesportsdeli@gmail.com. Also, check out my link tree. It's /Mike Hootner. Also, like to thank a few people. 40 Tons brand is a socially conscious cannabis brand, and they're doing amazing things. Check them out. We'd also like to thank Moolah Kicks, the first ever female brand basketball shoe in the history of the world. We'd also like to encourage you, if you're having a hard day and if you're feeling like you just don't want to live anymore, all you have to do is dial 988 from any phone, and there will be someone there 24/7, 365. So don't feel like you have to fight this battle alone. Don't forget to do your self-breast and self-testicular exams every month. It's really important, as early detection is the key. Remember, Black Lives Matter. Reach out to your local and state politicians for any individual or group that you feel are being marginalized. Stop the bullying. Stop the Asian hate. Let's end gun violence with common sense laws. Let's be allies for the LGBTQIA+ community. And I challenge those of you in the white space to be anti-racist, to be bridges and vessels, to help bridge the gaps between black and white America. And remember, until next time, it takes a village, everyone. Much love.